Hi, this is Benedict. People from around the world flock to the United States for study abroad. America is the veritable knowledge and education superpower. And it's easy to get here. Just hop on a plane. Although it'll cost you a little bit of money. 2,000 years ago, did Jesus study abroad as a young lad? During the famous 18 missing years of Jesus from the age of 12 to 30. Or he had no need to do so because, as church later decided in the year 325 at the Council of Nicaea, that Jesus was God itself. God doesn't need study abroad, does he? Well, if he did study abroad for argument's sake, where? India. Oh, why India of all places? How did he get there? 2,000 years ago. Oh man. What did he learn there once he got to India? And how did it shape his divinity? Unless you have been living with your head buried in the sand and go, I'm not going to listen to anything you say because I'm only going to listen to my pastor or my priest. Okay? Jesus traveling to India to study during those missing 18 years is a fairly well-known story. But most intelligent people will go, yeah, that's a very interesting story, but I can't take it seriously because, there's no proof. Somebody probably just made it up. Is it though? You believe in God without proof well enough, but don't believe this story because there's no proof? Remember, we're jurors, conscientious jurors at that. We don't brush aside any claim until we have heard the evidence, direct evidence if there is one, and certainly all the indirect evidence that needs to be considered. Well then, is there anything to this story? Fellow discombobulated, disconcerted, and befuddled average people lost in our spiritual journeys, welcome to Average Man's Spiritual Quest. I'm your host, Benedict. If you enjoy talking about our confusions on this channel, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the like and notification buttons. Today in part 1, let's talk about the background circumstances, logistics of Jesus' time. In a way, laying the foundation, if you will. It's a trial lawyer evidence talk, okay? To lay the ground level information based on which more specific evidence will be presented. First, for thousands of years in ancient times, India was the go-to place for study abroad. Chinese went there, Koreans went there, Middle Easterners certainly, even Greeks were well aware of the Indian civilization. India was a knowledge and education superpower of the day, just as the United States is in our times. And did you know that India had famous universities? Nalanda University from 128 BC, we're talking about BC. Taxila University from 108 BC. Okay. And Vikramshila University and other universities. These places started out as Buddhist monasteries and they taught philosophy, Vedic philosophy, math, science, astronomy, astrology. And hear this, listen to this, all under state supervision. Why can we call them universities? After all, they were like 2,000 years ago. Because they had thousands of students, hundreds of faculty, dormitories, cafeterias, and huge libraries. If it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And nobody else around the world had anything like them. Organized, established educational institutions. Not even the ancient Greeks, although Aristotle ran something that sort of resembles a small-scale research lab kind of a thing, especially on natural science, although Aristotelian natural science was all in the brain, not based on observations and experimentations. But, he ran a kind of a research institution. In Europe, the oldest universities like Oxford, Bologna, Heidelberg, and Sorbonne are 800 or less years old. So, India was the place to go for smart young men to study abroad from all over the world. Second, contrary to what we think today in our condescending pigeonhole point of view as modern people, historians tell us that since 3000 BC, that's like 5,000 years ago, there were a great deal of travel and commerce and exchange of ideas between India and the Middle East and ancient Greece, like Egyptians, Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Phoenicians, Chinese, and Koreans all traveled and traded with India. Now let's think about the land route first. The Silk Road network was already well established by Jesus' time. Now remember what we learned in high school? That during the Han Dynasty around 130 CE, a Han emperor sent Zhang Qian, a former general, as an envoy, and he discovered and established the Silk Road? Well, that's not quite right. It only means that China connected itself to the pre-existing network of trade. It's not like Zhang Qian went around and built superhighways to make up the Silk Road. Now, if Jesus took only the land route, it would have been something like, as you can see in the map, from Jerusalem to Bactria and to Kabul, present-day Afghanistan, and go over the Khyber Pass and come down into the Punjab area, present-day northern India. How about on the ocean? Well, seasonal trade winds in Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean made vibrant maritime trade and travel possible. Perhaps traveling on ships like the Dhow, as you can see in the picture, although historians simply don't know just how old the Dhow design is, but historians theorize that ships like that, or their ancestors, made these journeys all the time, because they have the records of that, although they don't know exactly when Dhow was developed. And these trade winds basically pushed the ships in one season this direction and in another season that direction. And that made the ocean voyages and trade very, very doable. Now, Jesus' trip from Palestine to India, either land route or land plus ocean route, would have taken weeks, maybe a couple of months, not years, as we might imagine. Some sources estimate that even the land route by itself would have taken anywhere between 7 to 9 weeks on the road. So, all in all, travel to India was eminently doable. But then, we figure a 13-year-old boy traveling by himself with a caravan on Silk Road? But in those days, 13-year-old boys were ripe old age to be considered for apprenticeship of many different kinds, including a caravan. So Jesus joining a caravan traveling on the Silk Road, starting from Jerusalem through the routes that we talked about at the age of 13, is eminently doable as well. No problem there either. And third, if study abroad was an option, what kind of students would do that? And why? Well, because Jesus was an outstandingly smart young man. Gospel of Luke chapter 2, Infancy Gospel of Thomas chapter 19. 12-year-old Jesus is visiting the Temple of Jerusalem with mom and dad, and they lose him. So they're looking for him all over the place, and eventually they find him and chastise him. Where have you been, Jesus? Where have you been worried sick? And Jesus turns around and says, where else did you think I would be except my Father's house, or something along the line. What was he doing there? He was debating with the Judaic scholars and rabbinical elders. He was, in other words, a child prodigy, as Mozart was a child prodigy in music. Well, if you had a child prodigy like Jesus, well, you would want him to get the best education possible, no? In more cosmopolitan place, kind of a knowledge and educational superpower place. Well, where do you send him? Of course you would send him to India. Oh, by the way, why not Greece? I mean, Greece is closer. After all, Greece is the home of such philosophers as Socrates and Plato and Aristotle about 2,500 years ago. That's about 500 years before Jesus. Well, the problem is this. Greek philosophy, in large part thanks to our friend Aristotle, became very, very rationalistic and logic-oriented. So political philosophy and primitive form of natural science, Aristotelian natural science, by the way, he did all the natural science thing with nothing but his brain, thinking about it, instead of relying on observations or experimentations. But that's another subject for another time. Those things were in vogue in Greece. But for deeper metaphysical and spiritual studies, where do you go? You have to go to India. For instance, if you're interested in studying philosophy and, say, history, would you go to Caltech or MIT? Of course not. Okay, so we have thought about some background considerations about Jesus' possible journey to India. In part 2, we'll look into how the world came to begin to think about the possibility of Jesus traveling to India. Well, I say world, but I'm really talking about only the Christian West. You know why? Because Indians are saying that, well, yeah, we've known about it for 2,000 years. Yeah, Jesus was here. So it was kind of a rude awakening, not a very welcome one for the Christian West to confront this claim that Jesus went to India for study abroad. Thank you. And keep thinking like esteemed, conscientious jurors that we are. Until the next time. Okay? Goodbye.